There he is. Awesome.
Hi,
Good to
sorry,
go.
I'm late.
Thanks for coming. Good to see you, Mike. Thanks. We're good to go, Ms. Floyd? All right. So Council, I'd like to call this Committee of the Whole meeting for December 10th, 2020 to order with adoption of the agenda. I would like to amend the agenda with an item 9E, which will be a verbal update from Development Services. So someone want to adopt the agenda with that amendment, please? Councillor Rhines, seconded by Councillor Charlotte. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. An adoption of the minutes of the regular Committee of the Whole from October 8th. If someone want to make that motion, please. Councillor Juncker, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from those Committee of the Whole minutes of October 8th? Seeing none, I'm just going to move on to announcements from the Mayor. Today we have several delegations, so I want to welcome everyone who's online. And the more people that come on, the smaller my eyes get trying to see everyone. So please bear with me as we move forward. And just going to really lead it off by going right into delegations and presentations, and we're going to start with engineering. So Mr. Black, are you going to start, or one of your colleagues?
Thank you, Mayor. I will immediately turn this over to our consultant team. Last council meeting, I'm sorry, the meeting before council awarded the contract to McElhaney Consultants to complete the liquid waste management plan, and today is our first day as a team presenting to you, council. And with that, I'll pass it on.
Okay, and Dragon, if you'll unmute, and Cindy, you're going to give me host.
I've already given it to you.
Okay. Okay. Oh. All right, I'm going to assume everyone can see that.
Yes.
Excellent. Great. Good to be here today. My name is Elisa Becker, and I'm with McElhaney Consulting. And I'm the project manager from McElhaney's standpoint, as well as the engagement lead for the liquid waste management plan. Liquid waste meaning sewage. And I have, for the past 5 years, been working with the City of Revelstoke on various planning and infrastructure projects, as well as working on the wastewater treatment facility, different components of it for the last few years. So I'm really excited to be part of this team and see this move forward. And I'm here today with our key technical lead, Dragan Rokic, and he'll introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. I do hope we can all hear me well. I'm basically located here in the Victoria office. I am also with McElhaney. I'm senior engineer and basically hydrotechnical engineering, water wastewater management specialist. I've got over 35 years of professional experience and many years experience with liquid waste management planning processes. I was also involved with the 2018 study that evaluated alternative options to upgrade the existing Revelstoke lagoons. And I'll be acting as the main technical lead, but also assisting Lisa with deliverables and providing assistance and participating in all the meetings going forward.
Great. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so why are we here? Why are we doing the liquid waste management plan update? There's a few reasons. Number one, the city's wastewater treatment facility, so WWTF, is almost at capacity and is operating under a very old permit, 1973. And what is the point of the liquid waste management plan? It is to define a plan that both protects health and gives a path forward for the city to grow and develop and align with operational and financial means when it comes to treating wastewater. Also, the liquid waste management plan, once it's adopted, it will be used to plan out the wastewater treatment facility upgrades and expansions. And also very key right now is it can be used for applying for grant funding in the future. And as we know, with COVID recovery and other grant programs that are coming out, this is really great timing to be going through this process. And then last, it is to provide a practical and implementable plan for expansion of the treatment facility in alignment with council priorities. So it's part of having a livable community, having a treatment facility that can treat all of the liquid waste, the sewage, as well as sound stewardship of the infrastructure, and then sustainability. So we're looking at the long term here. And then Dragan, if you'd like to comment on the implementability.
Yes, I think I would just like to stress at this point that words that should resonate from this point on are really implementable and realistic. So what that actually means in reality is to match all the necessary upgrades to the existing wastewater treatment system to match available funds. Because otherwise, if that's not sort of a closely related, we've seen many liquid waste management plans that didn't go anywhere. It's just the communities didn't have enough funding and financial support to implement their liquid wastewater management plans. I think that for the city of Revelstoke, we have a solution that would match basically phased upgrades with available funds going forward.
Thanks, Dragan. All right, so where are we at with the liquid waste management plan? I'm going to say the word, you're going to hear the word stage and phase. They're not interchangeable, they're not the same thing, and you're going to hear those a lot as we move forward in this process. And so stages are provincially regulated, and there are 3 of them, and they're like, you can think of them as gates. You have to get through stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. When Dragan talked about the word phasing, what he meant there is adding components onto the treatment facility in a phased approach to match community growth, okay? So where are we at with the liquid waste management plan? What stage are we at right now? Well, stage 1, which is great, has already been done. So we don't need to do stage 1. That is a high-level planning and inventory of what Revelstoke has in place right now. And it was completed in 2008. And basically, for those who may not be aware, what the city has as a treatment facility is that it's a lagoon system. So this actually is a picture of one of the city's lagoons. And once the wastewater is treated, it is discharged into the Illecillewaet River. And so in 2008, with population growth stalling, that the liquid waste management plan process was put on hold, but it has been completed and it's useful work that we can use today. So then we got into stage 2 back in 2012. A draft was completed, but also it didn't move forward at the time. There has been population growth since then, as well as a grant application that was in 2018, and that made this process come back to the forefront. So in 2018, with population growth and a grant application, we, as Dragan mentioned, put a feasibility study together on how to expand the treatment facility, matching with city funding that would likely be available. And so in 2018, the technical analysis came up with a lower cost option and more of a, we'll call it sustainable or an environmental approach that meets today's needs. And so we're now restarting stage 2 this month. And so we're in the middle of stage 2 already because of work that has already been done, but that's where we're starting today. And then we'll head off to stage 3. And stage 3 is basically a summary as well as more detailed look at the costs involved. There is quite a bit of engagement for both stage 2 and stage 3. But what's key for stage 3 is the ministry, the province, has to approve the plan. So everything we're doing, we are following the provincial guidelines because we want to make sure we have an adoptable plan at the end. And one of the key items here is that once the plan is adopted, there isn't a method currently for appealing that. Okay, and then so we are doing a combined 2 and 3, and I'll send it over to Dragon to tell us what that means.
Yes, I would just like to clarify that these stages 1, 2, and 3 are requirements of our provincial regulatory agency, Ministry of Environment. And these stages can be either discrete stages, so each stage can be a separate one. And then after each stage, we submit a report for the previous stage to the Ministry for approval before we go to the next stage. However, the ministry also allows that stages be combined, sort of, so to speak, in the process. And our proposal is based on the combined stage 2 and stage 3 because we know it's possible. And the reason for that approach is that we know that the city has been involved with the liquid waste management planning process for over a decade. So we just try to expedite work on this study and this plan. So eventually, as the final product was going to come out of this planning process is the combined stage 2 and 3 report that will be submitted to the ministry for the final approval and sign off. But in the meantime, we have a communication with the ministry just to keep them in the loop as to what's going on in the process.
Thanks, Dragon. All right. And so some additional technical analysis, like we said, had been completed in 2018. So we wanted to catch you up to speed on that. And if you're wondering what this picture is, this is the city's chlorination and then dechlorination infrastructure that is the last form of treatment before the treated wastewater discharges into the Illecillewaet River. So for those who may not have taken a site visit out there, that is what that is. So as we said, in 2018, additional technical analysis had been completed. And what was arrived at that time, based on information then, which is still current today, is a system that is phased. It improves the treatment, it's lower cost than a large mechanical treatment plant, and it's a lot easier on operations. So Dragon, if you'd like to talk to us a little bit more about what that is.
Yes, so as it was said before earlier, actually, right now we're at the end of the stage 2 process, and we have 2 competing alternatives on the table going forward. The one that McElhaney came up with in 2018 is based on the maximum usage of the existing lagoon treatment and just addition of a small addition of only those mechanical components that would make that treatment more robust and increase the quality of the effluent for the continued discharge to the Illecillewaet River. And at the same time, so as mentioned, we're looking at the phased approach to match the retrofits with hopefully available funds. And such approach goes through several phases, 1, 2, and 3, and will basically pave the way for the lagoon upgrades for the next 20 or 30, even 40 and longer years, depending on how the projected growth and flows will materialize over the next decade. So over the same time, we'll be meeting all the regulatory criteria with that approach. Another alternative is based on completely replacement of the existing lagoon system with a very intense mechanical process with 2 potential effluent disposal options, discharge options. One is the continued discharge to the Illecillewaet River, and the other one is to the Columbia River. So where that process stood before we got involved in 2018, we had an understanding that the city was looking at the effluent discharge to the Columbia River. However, nothing has happened since 2012, since the initial basically stage 2 report was issued, because the city just couldn't afford that alternative.
And so, Dragon, to clarify, the two options, the one that we're going to focus on is the adding components to the existing treatment facility in a phased approach that matches growth, versus the one large mechanical treatment plant all at once. And can you speak to the phased approach being quite a bit less expensive?
Exactly. Our approach will be based on the continued use on the existing lagoon process, and with some upgrades to the lagoons. That will be mainly some partitions and vertical curtains, and some addition of some very advanced wastewater treatment processes available today. I wouldn't like to go into too many details, but really the phase 1 is really the minimum that we need to add to the existing lagoons to improve the effluent quality. Again, subsequent phases will use the configuration from phase 1, and will be just incrementally upgraded with new components. So all the future upgrades will be using the upgrades implemented in the previous phases.
Thanks, Dragon. So the goal is use what we have, make it better, not a wholesale change. So engagement is really critical for the liquid waste management plan, for the adoption of it. Both it's provincially required, as well as the community in Revelstoke is very involved, very active, and we want to make sure we're capturing everyone's voice in this process. So where are we at with that? We've just started, but we have a pre-engagement survey that's been developed. And what that does is it asks the community, how do they want to be engaged? So it's for individuals to actually respond to, and that'll be going live pretty soon. And so we definitely want to encourage as many people as possible to respond to that. We'll also have a project website that it's in draft form now, but it will go live. And that will allow the community to go there, look at updates, and get background information. We'll also have social media posts to let people know when there's something new happening. And then committees as well. So this is a really fundamental part of the liquid waste management process, is there are committees, and the members of those are guided by the province. We have a steering committee, and that's really a small committee and is formed by just 1 or 2 people that will be directly involved in implementing the wastewater treatment facility upgrades in the future. So in this case, that would be Director of Engineering and Public Works, as well as a member from finance, to make sure that whatever is proposed is within the city's means. And then we'll also have a combined public advisory committee and technical advisory committee. And that's made up of representatives from the community, as well as from the city, so a council member, and then the technical team as well. So heavy engagement from committees, a lot of involvement there. And then last, of course, will be council updates and resolutions that are needed to move the process forward. So where are we at with next steps? Like I said, we have just started this. This is the kickoff. The committee formation is fundamental. So we're currently engaging different members of per the guidelines to form these committees, and then we'll be kicking those off in the new year and beginning with meeting. Pre-engagement survey is just about to be out, so we'd like to ask folks here if you can spread the word. We really want people to fill that out. It helps us to know how they want to be involved. creating the website and getting that live as a central repository for our information. And then on the technical side, Dragon will be focused on flow updates, anything new planning-wise that's happened since 2018, and making sure that we have those phased increments and the cost that's involved with those clearly laid out for the community. That's where we're at. Open it up for questions.
Great, thanks, Ms. Becker. Mr. Rokic, just a couple questions I'll start off with, and then council will weigh in. When we talk about timeline for stage 2, any idea how long that will take, or is that an appropriate question at this point?
That's a great question. Absolutely. So we are looking to do stage 2 and in the first half of next year. And that's related to how much engagement and how involved people are. So we hope people are very involved and very engaged, but we're aiming for the beginning half of next year for stage 2.
Okay, great, thank you. And then when we talk about the physical upgrades, we're going to have cleaner effluent. The retrofit also allows capacity and discharge. And so with our current licensing, will that give us more capacity to discharge, and we're able to upgrade that license, or how will that work?
Dragon?
Basically, your treatment system right now is almost at capacity, and the rules of the games are if, for example, the flow rates increases by 10%, then the provincial ministry requires a new registration. So we don't think that's an onerous process. We've gone through these processes many times in the past, and we've also done in the previous study identified that there is still some incremental capacity for the city that can use, but as I said, a significant flow increase, which ministry defines as more than 10%, would require new registration.
Okay, so at this point, do we know if what we're doing is going to increase this by more than 10%?
Yes. So phase 1 will provide additional capacity for developments, primarily land developments being considered within the city, such as Johnson Heights, Camosi Bench property, Thomas Brook, and some other areas that are not yet connected to the system.
All right, thank you. Councilors, any questions? Councilor Juncker, then Councilor Elliott.
Hi, thanks, Your Worship. Just one thing to clarify on your question. When we issued this tender a few weeks back, Mr. Black had indicated that he was hopeful that this would be done in 5 to 6 months. So now it sounds like stage 2 will be done in hopefully the first 6 months of the year. So what's the estimate then to get the actual whole plan done? Is that a year, or is it going to be over a year now, or?
Councilor Juncker, through the mayor, that's a great question. So we don't want to, our goal is to get the process done as quickly as possible, because as Dragon mentioned, the city's been in this process for quite a while. And so with the combined stage 2 and stage 3, we don't have to do that provincial review and approval in the middle. And so okay. I can tell you absolutely our goal is that stage 2 is done before 6 months, and okay. we right into stage 3, which is short. Stage 3 is quite a bit shorter because it's okay. a lot of re-looking at work that had been done. And then it will go to the ministry for approval. When the ministry gets that in their hands, that process there is, that's not under our control necessarily. Sure. We're pushing for a quick expedited review, but I can tell you absolutely our goal is not to delay, it's to get it done within more, like you said, the 4-month time frame, and then move straight into stage 3.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Maybe I can add to Councilor Juncker's question is that, as Lisa mentioned, basically the main work will be now to finalize the stage 2, because once the stage 2 is approved by the general public, basically in the city, that's basically the point of no return. And then basically stage 3 is just basically updating the costing information and pricing so that the city has a clear indication of the costing for related to each phase of the implementation. And
Okay.
stage 3 is relatively short compared to stage 2.
Okay. Can I ask one more, Your Worship?
Yes,
or?
absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely, Councillor.
So thank you for that. That completely answers it. My other question was maybe more for Mr. Black. So it talks about costs and whatnot. So it sounds like stage 2 will, and then stage 3 with the approval will determine the costs. And if we get approved on upgrading the lagoon system, then that will determine the cost of the next or the 3 phases, which had tentatively been budgeted from a few years ago. So this will determine the cost, and then will it come back to the finance department to then determine how we're going to pay for that? Or is this also going to determine where fees need to be at?
Excuse me, Councillor Yonker, through Your Worship. You've hit both points absolutely correct. This will determine what the long-term costs are to the city, and then we have to find a way to, with the DCCs and utility rates, to fund those improvements that have been defined by this process.
Okay, so this will come to the gurus in finance and yourself, and then you guys will bring it to council at that time to determine next steps and how we can find the funding through grants, DCCs, taxation, basically over the next several years.
Through Your Worship, yes, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Okay, I have a series of questions. Just on the measure of discharge that we're, is it meters per, how do you measure?
Councillor Elliott, through Your Worship, I'll let Dragon answer that.
Yeah, the discharge is typically measured in cubic meters a day.
Yeah, so I think Mr. Black presented to council a few sessions back about the current license that we have is 4,000, and our actual discharge at this time was 2,700. Is that right, Mr. Black? Roughly.
Through Your Worship, I believe that's roughly correct.
So we've got a little bit of capacity left currently. Is that right? What's the end goal? Where do we want to end up with the new improvements that you propose?
Councillor Elliott, keep in mind that the existing discharge permit is based on the maximum flow. So right. 2,100 cubic meters a day. Those are, let's say an average flow. But the maximum flows typically occur during the wet weather period, during periods of sustained rain, when yes. There is also some inflow and infiltration into the system. And we have data that was published in our 2018 study that these maximum flows are being regularly exceeded, basically during wet weather flows. To answer your question, so the average flows, and I think that's in our 2018 study, I think the average flows with all these upgrades will increase to about 7,000 cubic meters a day. And the wet weather flows that the system would be able to handle are around 17,000 cubic meters a day. So basically, that's a phased approach. Not immediately, but over time.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I'm going. I just want to make sure that we're building enough capacity in the future that we can grow, so that we don't have to face this another 10 years out.
No, definitely. That was one of the main objectives of our previous study.
And I think regarding funding the proposal, I think the lagoon system is what is the most cost effective, rather than replacing the whole mechanical processing system is the direction we're going. Is that right?
Exactly. However, the reason why we're adding a small sort of a relatively small mechanical component is that the regulatory criteria are becoming more and more stringent every year. And basically keep in mind that your system was approved initially in the 70s, and the permit was updated, after that, 10 or 15 years after that. But the grandfathered systems so to speak, do not have to immediately comply with the new regulation, but the ministry has a mandate to force you to comply. So in other words, for example, your system today is not approvable by the ministry because it's the effluent quality being discharged to the Silhouette River wouldn't be sufficient for the new registration, basically. So that's why one of the objectives is to improve the effluent quality. One of the issues with the discharge to the Silhouette River is the dilution ratios of sewage, treated sewage or treated effluent to the river flow during low flows.
Right.
So there is a minimum that has to be met, and we don't have that minimum in place.
You mentioned just on the peak periods, is the storm discharge, the storm water being put into our sewer system as well? Is that causing some trouble?
Yes, that's what basically the storm water being infiltrated into the collection system causes flow peaks during wet weather flows. Correct.
Is that something we're trying to isolate or separate, Stephen?
Through your worship, yes, Councillor Elliott, that is one of the projects that we have underway right now, is to do a asset model for our sewer system and do the infiltration and inflow studies that you might have heard previously, the I&I studies, so that we can understand what the impacts of that rainwater, stormwater, snow melt is on our treatment system. Right. I've heard numbers that it's actually quite a large number that we're treating, which we should not be putting through the plant. That should be recharging our groundwater or flowing into streams instead of going to the plant.
And so before you carry on, Councillor Elliott, so Mr. Black, just for clarification, our stormwater now in our stormwater zones, stormwater drains are not going into the liquid waste management plant at this point. We have them diverted to a stream. Is that not correct?
We have a small area, Columbia Park, where we have roof leaders connected directly to the sewer system. And so that's an area that we do want to address in the future. We also know that many of the manholes in town are old. And if you look at the lids, they are crumbled around them, which typically indicates that you're getting water infiltrating through the manholes into the sanitary sewer. And so two components there. And as you are aware, we are also undertaking a stormwater management plan and looking at addressing the I&I issue in the next year or so too.
Great, thank you. Okay, Councillor Elliott, you had another question.
Just maybe two more. Lagoon space, we have capacity to expand in areas. Is that right?
We don't have area to expand around the lagoons, but we'll be basically using the lagoons themselves. So we'll basically isolate areas within the existing lagoons, not expanding the existing footprint, and we'll add some technologies inside the lagoon to improve the treatment. Okay. That is possible today.
Right. Okay. And one last, just on the fats, oils, and stuff that go into our water system, is that a problem that we need to address as well?
To your worship, Councillor Elliott, that is a desire of the water and sewer team in the public works yard for us to create the bylaws to address the fog, the fat, oil, grease.
Yeah.
That is another project that will take some time to get to, but I believe there will be some components of the liquid waste management plan which will recommend staff pursue some of these technologies and bylaw improvements in order to help improve our operations.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry for the ream of questions.
Oh, thanks for that. Just further to the fog, I know Ms. Becker did a presentation probably not long after we were starting our term, and definitely that caused an issue with some of our lift stations. And so trying to keep the fats, oils, and greases out of our sewer system is absolutely essential as we move forward, and it definitely will be the best thing. I think Dragon and Elisa can comment on that, but definitely the best thing for how we keep our bacteria working in the lagoons as well, by keeping that stuff out. councillors, any further comments or questions? Ms. Beck, go ahead, Councillor Brooks Hill.
I have a question just in terms of kind of that last point on the last slide, updating the projected flows based on planning data, resort neighborhoods, and population growth. I'm just basically curious, are you going to be using the TELUS Insight data or the sort of more official provincial population data to determine who's actually living in Revelstoke and using the sewer system?
Through your worship. Oh, okay.
Thank you. Through your worship, Councillor Brooksfield, the Director of Planning, who's also on this call, is currently updating the existing population with Rennie and Associates to determine our base populations, our shadow populations, and then as the OCP process proceeds, that's the right one, sorry, proceeds, that will help determine what our build-out population will be, including all of the visitors, all of the shadow population, and the permanent population. And that is what we will base the flows and demand for the wastewater treatment plant in the future. Director Wade, I don't know if you'd like to supplement anything I've said.
Sure. Thank you, Director Black. I just wanted to let you know that the report is just being finalized, and we're meeting with Director Black and Director Braun in regards to this to sort it out. So council will be seeing this population update in the beginning of 2021. And it will be using, outside of Stats Canada, we actually are using the vital statistics as well, water consumption, BC assessment, some of the tourism Revelstoke visitor data. So we're doing using various sources. So it has expanded on just BC stats. Okay.
Excellent. Thanks so much. That's great to hear.
Councillors, any further questions? Ms. Becker, thank you. Mr. Rochitz, thank you for being here today and for giving us the information that we need as we move forward. Is there any last words that you would like to say?
None. We're just looking forward to moving forward with the city and getting this done.
Great. We appreciate that.
I would just like to say thank you to giving us this opportunity to work with you and to help you out with your wastewater management issues. We are excited to get on this as soon as possible, as we speak. Literally. Yeah. So
and believe us, we're just as happy to have you on board. We have some issues down there that council would like to put behind us and move forward. So thank you for taking us on, and we look forward to a good arrangement as we move forward. Thanks again.
Yes, and we really would like clearly to help your community, and I think eventually, I think you won't be disappointed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to move on to 9A, staff reports, development services, age-friendly survey. Ms. Wade, would you like to introduce our guest, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to introduce Lisa Seer. Lisa Seer has been working with us in regards to updating the age-friendly plan. We've been working with Director Braun. This project was originally over with Director Braun, and we have brought it into development services because it impacts the OCP and our housing action plan. And Lisa has been working with us over the last couple of months on this project and has done an excellent job and is here today to present where she is and provide you with an update.
Thank you so much, Director Wade. Good afternoon, everyone, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be working on this. My name is Lisa Seer, and I do a lot of work in the community with seniors, and so this fits well into the work that I'm already doing. So a bit of a background information. The city of Revelstoke in 2009 did an age-friendly assessment under the prior the former social development coordinator, Jill Zacharias, and has actually been recognized as a leader in this. There was a little video made on the town of Revelstoke. So Revelstoke is already being considered and regarded as being on the forefront of this. But of course, that was several moons ago. So in 2020, Revelstoke received funding once again from UBCM to update its age-friendly plan. And the timing with this is actually really great because it's going to allow for recommendations to be inserted into the and incorporated into the official community plan as well as it undergoes its update. The idea and the goal is also for the recommendations that arise out of this assessment also be used for other strategic documents such as the housing and transportation documents and anything else that where they can be useful. So perhaps even the recovery task force work. So what exactly is age-friendly? It is based on a specific set of guidelines that are established by the World Health Organization. They basically look at policies, services, and structures that are designed to support older people as they age, in order to ensure that they continue to live full lives in their community and in their homes for as long as possible. So the way that I organized the categories are according to the OCP's proposed sections, so that they would be easier to slot in. So the 4 categories for the OCP are the environment, growth management, community, and culture. And as you can see here, the 8 categories have then been placed in the relevant places. So obviously environment, outdoor spaces and buildings, and then growth management, we'll look at transportation, housing, and then a broader community support, health and wellness. So this looks at not only healthcare supports that exist here in town, but also just the degree of community-based organizations, for example, and how supported seniors are feeling in this town in general. So community then looks at whether or not they're engaged, for example, with the senior center, or what kind of activities they participate in. Communications and information looks at the ability for seniors to receive and understand communications, not only from the city, but in regards to their health and anything else that might be relevant to them. And then community engagement and employment looks at essentially what employment opportunities exist for them, or opportunities for higher learning through colleges and community organizations. Culture looks at whether or not seniors feel respected, included, and safe in practicing their beliefs, their faith, their sexuality, and feel safe just living in town. So methods, the way that the survey was structured, or I suppose the way we started, was bringing in some of the people that were a part of the 2009 survey and age-friendly assessment, and also looking at service providers, frontline workers, and seniors themselves, obviously, to find out what their main issues are and what they would like to see in the survey. Also looked at best practices and what other communities are doing, and a number of initiatives that have been taking place in communities that are similar to Revelstoke in size and in resort municipalities, for example. The survey was launched for about a month, September to October, and feel that we got an excellent response, especially given that not all seniors are online, that this was a difficult time to engage with them precisely because face-to-face engagement was challenging and limited. So 196 responses online, and then 87 paper copies that were distributed through engagement partners. So organizations like the Senior Center, the library, Moberly Manor and other seniors residences also were considered engagement partners, and they helped disseminate the survey. And part of the reason this was done in this way was in the 2009 assessment. Some of the people that were part of the working group this time around felt that in the prior assessment that the voice of the vulnerable had sort of been lost and was not fully captured. And so there was increased effort to really reach those more vulnerable seniors as well. So there were a couple of face-to-face engagement opportunities at the market and food bank, for example, and then just going and being in the residences themselves through the engagement partners. So just a quick glance at the project timeline. Currently just starting phase 3 data analysis. So this report will just be a brief overview of some of the key findings without the detailed numbers, but next up will be the actual report itself and the recommendations. So we're through the first 2 phases. And survey findings. So about the respondents, about 16% of seniors in town responded, went with 55 and over because this is the data on Government of Canada website started senior at 55. We also understand that that retirement 65 is also commonly considered senior, but we figured this would be a good way to get a global understanding for older adults. 69% of respondents were female, 29% male, 1% transgender. That was about 4 respondents. And then 90% of respondents actually did have access to the internet and a computer. So some that filled out the paper copies actually could have gone online, and that was one of the learnings, I suppose. And then most of the respondents, 98%, do live in Revelstoke. The other 1% that took the time to answer the survey come here regularly. They access the services and are considering a move here. So their responses were considered valid. So you can see in the little chart the age ranges. So the pre-retirement age, 23% respondents, and then the retirement, which is 65 to 79, the bigger percentage, 63%, and then 80 to 100 plus. There was one respondent that was 101, so a little plus sign there, 14%. So actually quite a good representation of all the age groups. So about the respondents, 59% indicated that they plan on carrying out the rest of their lives in Revelstoke. So a couple of answers were sort of amalgamated here to come up with that 59%, because there's an assumption that 11 to 20 years is going to be the rest of their lives, as well as 20 plus years. And then 34% of the respondents live alone. So the survey themes, so these are the preliminary findings based on the results. This includes some of the qualitative responses as well as the survey responses. The main issues that were identified were sidewalks, in particular downtown, 5th, 6th, and 7th Street, though other areas of town were also identified, Arrow Heights and Columbia Park. And so these are areas that either don't have sidewalks or have sidewalks that are in need of repair, and seniors felt that this presents a safety risk, in particular in the winter where it's slippery and or if there's no sidewalk, then they're walking on the street. Strong desire to see the Greenbelt network expanded. Seniors are looking for more outdoor walkable areas. I think safe to say that people in this town benefit from the Greenbelt. And then snow removal was also identified as an issue. So this is often the private company as well, but the large snowbanks tend to block the sidewalks, or they encroach on the sidewalks, giving the seniors less space to move. Some also mentioned that the snow is plowed onto their residence, and then they struggle to actually come out of their own private driveways. So I don't have a location on that, but that came up a couple of times. As far as growth management goes, the main concern is the lack of affordable housing and appropriate housing options. So many indicated that they would like to downsize, but they don't have any viable options at this moment. And transportation out of town was also identified as one of the challenges for seniors needing to get out for medical appointments and whatnot in, say, Salmon Arm or Kelowna. But that getting around town is actually not much of an issue. They can generally rely on friends or a volunteer. And then parking near the medical clinic and in town. So many seniors expressed the need or the desire to park right in front of the clinic or wherever it is that they like to go. And there were some comments about the street patios during the summer that took away from some parking spots when they, when someone has mobility issues. Obviously walking 3 blocks is a bigger challenge. So looking at, they expressed a desire for more parking closer to the places that they need to be. Community, many seniors foresee needing support to stay in their homes. So the biggest need that was expressed was snow shoveling, but they also foresee needing help with a number of supports, such as help with meal prep, groceries, and the types of services that one might find in an assisted living facility. But in order for them to stay in their homes would benefit from some kind of additional supports that are not provided, that are difficult to find here. And that, unsurprisingly, seniors are feeling isolated due to COVID. They did identify that they normally do live rich and full lives. They participate with the senior center, the community center, and other community events, the Performing Arts Center. So there was a resoundingly positive response there. Obviously, with COVID and things being shut down, that's had a heavy, large impact on seniors. So next steps, I'm completing the survey analysis as we speak. So should plan to be done in January, and then able to provide a final report in February with recommendations. And these will be used to inform strategic documents. So these include the OCP, Housing Action Plan, Master Transportation Plan, and more. And you can expect to see me again sometime in the spring to present the recommendations and the final findings of the survey. So that is the presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Lisa, I just want to say thanks for the work that you're doing in the community. I heard you talking with Sean today, and the Age Helping phone line 837-8131. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That seniors can connect to. That number will be in my head, I guess, because I are one. But I look at those sorts of things and say anything that we can do in our community to make sure seniors are able to stay until end of life, because they've done the groundwork for us in many communities or many parts of this community. So thanks for what you're doing, and appreciate all of this. Looking forward to the end results for all of the finalization. Councillors, any questions or comments? Councillor Yonker, then Councillor Rond.
Thanks, Lisa, very much. Really appreciate it, and all the work you've been doing in the community. Just a couple questions for whoever, Your Worship. Just in regards to some of the points that were brought up from the survey, am I able to send off an email to you and or staff about some things that maybe we could possibly look into in regards to sidewalks? Like, I'm thinking bus shelters might be something that we could look into that might fall under RMI funding, because the shuttle and the BC Transit bus stops double up. And then as well, we can discuss at budgets around increasing of sidewalk funding, etc.
Sure. Yep. Send it on, and then we'll talk to the appropriate staff and see how we can move that forward.
Okay. Perfect. And sorry.
Just to add to what you're saying, Councillor Yonker. there were some questions on transportation and bus shelters in particular. So that will also help inform whatever plans the city moves forward with in regards to bus shelters.
Thanks. Yeah, no, if we can find a way to get them funded, I'm just not sure. So maybe I'll send off an email to staff or to you and Council, Gary, and then you can pass it on, just some questions I had about it. And then the other thing was maybe us looking into writing another letter like other municipalities are doing to the province about getting them to reinvest in transportation for rural communities.
Yep, that sounds good. And there'll be some recommendations coming from staff, both through the transportation plan and just with what they've got available to us as well. But definitely
for sure. I just think at least if we look into sending off a letter to SILGA, so we can get that sent and get the UVCM done thing for this year.
Yep. Good.
So I'll email that all to you either this evening or tomorrow. Then thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. I was actually just going to mention what Cody was saying about RMI funding and the upgrading sort of covered shuttle stops. I think would be a good win, kind of serving multiple groups. I was also curious about the OCP, like the policies that will inform the OCP. What is an example of like what that might look like? I think I just sometimes have a hard time understanding how these, like I understand that they work together, but I'm yeah, like, is that work that we would need to contract out specifically because it's like, you know, someone does just that? Or is this like stuff that we'll use from the survey and then be like, we need to put a bus stop here? Or I'm just looking for, I guess, more examples or information about that.
Ms. Wade, do you want to weigh in at all on how that process, the things coming from the survey, will inform the OCP?
Sure. So what happens is we take the data analysis that Lisa will conclude a report with. We take those and integrate it into the 4 sections as she's outlined, and that we will develop a policy around her findings, and that will be integrated into the OCP.
So one example could, like, I'm just pulling it out of nowhere, but like if there's going to be a new neighborhood built here, there has to be sidewalks and there has to be a covered bus stop and there has to be this many handicap parking spots or something, just as an example.
That would be a little more detailed. An OCP policy is a little more robust to be a wider spectrum. That's normally how a policy is done. Those individual pieces like a transit shelter and sidewalk connections would be detailed in a more detailed neighborhood plan, and also be brought up in a lot of our development permits, as well as some conditions. So for
policies, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So for example, a policy would be that the objective would be to design neighborhoods so that they consider age-friendly or seniors in the design, so that they would be more accommodate like mobility issues and other issues like that. And so it would be a leading policy that would influence the design of the neighborhood to accommodate seniors.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councilors, any further questions? Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, I think it's all summarized with inclusivity, and it's young and old that could use sidewalks and bus shelters. And if we come up with a new transportation plan, make it appropriate for everybody. So that's part of the OCP, and I'm sure you're looking at that, Mrs. Wade, when you're looking at the transportation plan, and Stephen, what you guys are doing. It's important to us. So let's. I mean, I'm glad, Lisa, you're providing the information, and it just I think it's just sort of part of the planning process we need.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. You're absolutely right. Just to add to that, so when a town is age-friendly, it is understood that they are, yes, they're friendly or they're accessible to seniors, but a mother with a stroller can also access those same ways, or someone with, that gets around in a scooter or whatever it may be. So in accomplishing age-friendly status or policies, then you can also rest assured that you're hitting the other benchmarks or qualifications that you would want for any kind of inclusive city. So you're right.
And I think we're working on trails networks and improving our accessibility and walkways in our community, and that lines up with what you've already, one of the themes that you highlighted. I do have one question though. You said 8 domains. The 4 that you mentioned don't quite fit. Is there more?
So the 4 are in the 4 are the OCP sections or categories, and within the 4 are 8. I'm not sure if you're looking at the report right now, but if you
yeah, I scribbled something down. You mentioned 8 domains when you had your study, and then I just looked at the environment, growth, community, and culture as your segments.
So those are the city's OCP categories, and within environment, you've got outdoor spaces and buildings. Within growth management, you've got housing, transportation, community, wellness, and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any more questions? Any comments? Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you doing this presentation and putting this together, and again for the work that you're doing in the community.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. Thanks again. All right, we're going to move on to item 9B, economic development and food security. We have a presentation. So Ms. Hemphill, you're here, and someone else is going to weigh in as well, I believe.
Hi, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, there we go.
While she's getting that set up, I'll just introduce Melissa. She is our food security coordinator for the community and is contracted through Community Connections and is supported with core funding from council over the last 3 years. It has been working on food security issues since I believe 2014 when we first developed a food strategy. So Melissa will give you some of the highlights from that work with council and wrap up with talking about the kinds of tools we can use within development services and CED to support food security strategy implementation.
Great, thanks, Ms. Braun. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for that, Ingrid. So yeah, most of you know me as the food security coordinator here. And so thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak to how the pandemic is affecting our community's food security. So it's brought up a lot of questions for people about their food, where it comes from, if there's enough, if they can afford it. It has cast a huge spotlight on food security as a broad issue across the world, really, and including in our community. We've seen a high demand for local food and for community supported agriculture or CSA or like a harvest box each week. A great surge in gardening. You can see that walking around town and seeing all the new garden boxes. We even had a canning lid shortage. So all kinds of different effects, and the pandemic and food security has looked different for different people. And I think a lot of that depends on your income, your knowledge, your connections within the food system, and whether you own land or not. That plays a big part. Interestingly, in the BC CDC Speak survey, 10.5% of the Revelstoke respondents said that they worry about food running out before before they get more money to pay for more. So a significant challenge for our local residents. So when I think about food security, I kind of think about it as a coin, or today as a carrot. On one side is the local food system and all the different pieces that go into that system, right down to our hardware stores that supply us with seeds and building materials and soil and stuff for our gardens. And on the other side of that coin are the folks that have a hard time participating in that system. And they're the folks that we serve here at the food bank through market coupons, community dinners. They depend on home gardening and the kind of underground culture of food trading and bartering. And it's council's purview is a little bit limited in how you can affect food security within the community, but there are some roles to play. And part of your package was a handout from the Kootenay, or the Central Kootenay Food Policy Council, where they talked about some policy moves that municipalities can take, and whether that's to allow or to regulate or to inspire local food production or usage, or just strengthening of the local food system. I think it's really interesting to note that 3 of our local or urban farms had record sales in 2020 with a huge demand for milk and eggs. So it's a very local issue that we're seeing here. both on the food system side and the food insecurity side. So a bunch of fragility showed up through the pandemic in our food system, most notably around supply chain issues. We all saw the empty shelves back in March and April. Packaging issues have come up, and pricing is probably one of the biggest issues. Every year, Dalhousie University and the University of Guelph put out a food price report, and this year they were joined by University of Saskatchewan and BC. And they predict food pricing for the coming year. And so this report for 2021 is their highest ever expected increase, 3 to 5% increase overall. And so mostly in the meat and veg sectors, the meat mostly around packing plants and those sorts of distribution issues, because it is for the large part on the grand scheme, our local or our meat production in our country. And the vegetable side, we're getting really affected by California's wildfire season, and we can expect a 6.5% increase in our vegetable pricing. And another notable one was in wheat and the demand for flour for home baking and bread making. So a family of 4 next year can expect to spend $13,907, which is a $700 increase from 2020. So a pretty significant jump if you are on a very fixed income or have lost income through the pandemic. Now, a lot of that relates back to worker shortages, our travel restrictions, our inability to bring folks in from other nations to help with our farming. We saw huge demand fall onto our small scale producers, and a real challenge with pivoting their structure for selling food and also procuring all the inputs that they need in order to scale up. There's a lot of hunting and gathering pressure out there. I think there's more people in trucks than there are deer out on those forestry roads this year. And lots of reports of coming home empty-handed, but running into lots of people. So a lot of people are trying to get on that train of gathering their own food and being more sovereign in their food supplies. But we also see a big knowledge gap. So lots of gardens popping up, but how many of them were successful is a bit of a challenge. I ran a garden survey through the fall to kind of see what happened out there and what people noted and how they could be supported moving forward. Lots of stats on there. I'll let you guys kind of read through them, but some of the interesting things for me was just this intersectionality between our food and our housing. So 82% of those respondents own their home. So there's some real reluctance for folks who are renting or inability to be growing their own food. So that's a challenge for us as a community. Some economic impacts there in terms of how this may have impacted their grocery bills, how they may have traded or sold their harvest, and also those struggles again with sourcing supplies. And I think it's really interesting that a lot of folks, 150, felt that gardening this year increased their value that they see in local food production. So that's a nice thing. When I speak with gardeners and those who raise animals for food, what I hear is a real sense of responsibility to feed themselves and their family. It's nobody else's responsibility. It's not the grocery stores. It's not our local governments. It's an individual responsibility. And it is tied with health and their connection to land, their sense of sovereignty over who controls their food and what they have access to. And it's a response to a supply in a time of crisis. And so it interrelates with how we use land and how we look at land. And growing, producing, trading, sharing food is all an opportunity to build community, to connect with nature and to connect with our roots. A lot of us come from a farming or a food producing background, and that's important to people. It's rarely about money. It's much more about those other things that I mentioned. It's, you rarely hear of chicken, like hen producers, that are producing eggs say that it's saving them money. It's usually costing them more money, but the reasons they do it are much more deeply ingrained and speak to their values. So individuals are experiencing the pandemic in different ways, as I mentioned, but producing more food is how some people want to respond. Unfortunately, some of our bylaws are limiting people's ability to raise their own food, and we have seen a couple of local folks and business owners leave the community in order to access the ability to grow more food or raise more food. Sorry about the phone ringing. Somebody will answer it. So in terms of household food insecurity, there's some big numbers up there for us. They have huge impact on our capacity to support our community in terms of new clients and more visits. And what we see here is a combination of both systemic and situational poverty. So systemic issue or systemic poverty is those folks who are on disability supports and pensions. They're caught by the security net that we enjoy here in Canada, but they're also indentured by it. They don't have the ability to increase their income to raise them up out of their situation. They're always going to need support. And that's why it's important for food banks to exist. Those in situational poverty, it's more of a personal crisis, and they can probably get out of their situation with a little bit of help. And so we're helping both of those sets of groups. The systemic group it's a public problem, it's a policy problem. Most of it's not municipal, right? It's provincial income supports and federal funding supports. But that situational poverty is more of a personal problem, and we can help people out to push through that stage in their lives. And you can see that through 36% being employed. That speaks to the affordability of our community and that we have a fair number of working poor who use our services. And what we're seeing across the board is skyrocketing demand for mental health supports. And I think you and I all feel that in our lives and our personal relationships, that this is stressful times. So in terms of the emergency response that I see needed in our community in terms of food security is throwing as much money as we can at the food bank and purchasing as much food as we can. We definitely purchase almost entirely locally. We do get some shipments through our affiliations with Food Banks BC, but we've had some great support and we just need that to keep coming. We expect that what we're seeing in terms of food insecurity and demands for our food services to carry on even past vaccine threshold days, that people are going to be affected long term in some cases. Another way to support folks in the immediate time frame is through tax breaks. And any way that we can keep money in people's pockets is appreciated. Providing mental health supports, of course, is super important, and we have a project underway for that. Any way we can find to provide free transit, again, keeping money in people's pockets is welcome, and that BC Transit Service Review will hopefully show us some ways to accomplish that. What we're also seeing in some of our most vulnerable is the need for hygiene centers and temporary shelter. People who are not housed or inappropriately housed, how do they stay sanitary and safe during the pandemic? So working on addressing that. So a few things that we can do in the short term. I don't know about you, I can't think long term, so I'm stopping at medium term today. I think it's really great to continue support from council and from the CSRD on food security projects and work, and to continue to elevate our local food system and support our vulnerable folks. I think it's great to integrate food security, into the OCP and our zoning bylaws, and there's some opportunities there. And I'd love to support development services in exploring the animal bylaw and sharing what I've heard from folks around that issue, so that we can provide council with some ideas there of dealing with that issue. Part of the OCP is inventorying our lands, and that's a really important piece for our future to be ready for opportunities in terms of food production and food lands usage. Through Trudeau's government, we've seen a new federal food policy and a bunch of funding rolling out as a result of that. And with the pandemic highlighting food security even more, we can expect the recognition of food projects to elevate communities, both with jobs, with tourism, and with food security. So being ready for those projects is a smart way to think forward. Utilizing our existing food assets and supporting new foods assets is really important for retaining and expanding our agribusinesses. Yeah, we're not a farming community, but in the face of climate change, we have to think about producing more food and being more self-resilient here as a community. And there's some opportunities that extend beyond that in terms of tourism as well. And then last but not least, affordable housing and thinking about food when we are dealing with affordable housing and people's access to food, their ability to grow some themselves or raise some themselves, and how that contributes to a sense of well-being and personal security. So just a short list of major things to think about, but lots of opportunities, which is wonderful. Food is an amazing vehicle to bring people together, to support each other as a community, and I definitely think of it as more than nourishment and much more along the lines of social cohesion. So thanks for your time. Happy to take your questions.
Great, thanks, Melissa. I appreciate all you're doing. Councillor Rind.
Yeah, thanks so much, Melissa. It's so fascinating. I feel like I could listen to you talk about this forever because it's just like information I don't know, and I feel like a lot of people don't know, and it's really interesting and relevant. And I for sure, as I was one of those people during the pandemic that's part of that percentage of people who hasn't, grown their own food, and all of a sudden I'm like, we should get some chickens, we should do this, and my partner's like, you can't keep a cactus alive, we're not getting a chicken. But it's sort of top of mind because you go to the grocery store, you never expect that you're going to need new eggs, or that you're going to need eggs, and that they won't be there until this pandemic kind of hits. So it's like been more and more interesting to learn about food security with this pandemic kind of putting it in everybody's face. I guess my question is more for Marianne. It's just like, or for anybody who wants to answer it at the city, it's just, I'm curious, like what you need, or for you to answer from the city in order to help implement these zoning changes, because I noticed in the report, it did say, there is a level of engagement that the city can offer without increasing funding, but we're also going to need to dedicate development services resourcing to get these zoning bylaws updated. So I'm just curious, what does that look like in terms of money and your time, and how much is involved? Like, how big of a project is that?
It's a significant project, I think. I've been researching food policy for 5 years now, hoping to be able to be a resource for the community and development services in developing bylaws and getting some robust language into the OCP. And so part of the funding for my position comes from the city for that partnership of working on food policy. So I'm available, I'm ready. I've got a fiber this thick of resources, and it's really just about aligning with the huge job that development services has of working on that. And so I think I can bring forward some good engagement when the opportunity is right to do that. And so it's just a matter of aligning timelines.
Right. Ms. Braun. Ms. Braun and Ms. Wade.
Sure. I just wanted to add that as well as working within the municipal boundaries with our Development Services Department and CD, there's an opportunity here to work with Melissa and Community Connections and the CSRD itself outside the city boundaries. So we were able to secure $20,000 from the CSRD as part of our EOF application that was approved in the fall. And that is there to be allocated to some kind of activity or projects that'll support food security in the larger region as well as the community. So, there's opportunities there to work with them in CED. I'd also say that just our whole push through CED at investor attraction, right? And looking at ecotourism opportunities and foodie culture opportunities, there's many opportunities to collaborate with tourism, with our partners in rec sites and trails, and with our growers and producers in the area to develop opportunities for visitors and residents as well.
Thank you. Ms. White.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just wanted to expand on that because we had a very good meeting, I guess it was about a month ago, with Melissa and the committee and Director Braun. And I just wanted everyone to know that we have a consultant who's working with us on the housekeeping amendments for the zoning bylaw and getting some enabling housekeeping amendments in to support greenhouses and other initiatives is in the process, and it'll be part of that package that'll be coming next year. And we also are very aware of these, and what we do try to do is when we see new development permits come in, we try to encourage uses of rooftop gardens, for example, or something integrated in, as we're looking at the Johnson Heights neighborhood plan. We have been in discussion with Melissa on those initiatives. So even though we don't have the amendments necessarily in place yet, we are looking at ways to integrate as we review in the current applications.
Thank you. Councillors, any further comments or questions? Councillor Elliott, Councillor Charlotte.
Yeah, I know I've mentioned it before, Melissa. Just do you find it difficult? You're judging. You're doing two things at once. One's food ability to produce it locally and keeping our product as natural and as close to consumption as possible. But then the other thing is the actual people who don't have enough, the poverty. And it seems oftentimes, the initiative you're under is you're wearing two hats. And I'm just sort of, the confusion is troubling for me. I don't know if you can, we can't address those things through our zoning. We can't address those through our OCP. We're going to have poverty, and we'll find a way to deal with that, from our community. But the zoning is a totally different issue. Do you see trouble with that?
No, I see that they tie together perfectly, and I'll give you a good example. This past summer, First Light Farm was our newest farm here in the community, and it was really important to them before they even had boots on the ground that they wanted to support those who had the most trouble sourcing food. So they ran a crowdfunding campaign, and they came to us and said, we want to raise $500 and we'll provide you with $500 worth of produce. And they ended up raising $1,000 in 6 days and provided the food bank with amazing produce that they grew locally here in town from rented land. So they were really challenged to find land. That was the crux. It is the crux around here, is we don't have a lot of geography, and making use of quarter-acre plots here and there contributes to the overall picture. So anything we can do to support local food production inherently supports those who are food insecure, whether that's through, selling us their seconds at a discounted rate here at the food bank, or providing donations, or people just donating their backyard produce. It all adds up to supporting those in need. The more there is, the more surplus there is. So I think they go hand in hand.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people that fund Community Connection with donations, and the grocery stores already contribute pretty excessively. I think, Cody, you'd know more than I do. But I just think if you're arguing for food sustainability, keep it clean. This is what we're doing. We're growing local. We're keeping it within the 200-mile limit. If we need support for our, inadequately funded people, or people who need it or are in poverty, then that's a different issue. And I think sometimes it's clouded with the dialogue.
Yeah, it can be clouded, and food insecurity, as you guys pass on to UBCM, it's an income issue and needs income-based solutions.
Locally. So I'm just trying to keep it clean from my perspective. That's all.
Yeah, I would definitely say food insecurity is an income issue, but a robust local food system serves to support those who are food insecure as well.
Great.
You say most of the growers, though, are homeowners, so they're doing it for their own production, right? And you're changing the zoning for chickens and goats and eggs for their own consumption, for the most part.
Or to sell.
Or to sell. Yeah. So just again, it's just separating the issues, and that's important. Well, my thinking anyway.
Great. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks for doing this presentation, Melissa. This was amazing, especially seeing the stats from that survey. I was curious to see what those numbers looked like. And just through my own experience trying to garden as a tenant, it's definitely a challenge where having something consistent and knowing what the next season's going to look like. I'm curious as to whether there is anything that you see for next season, since we are looking at increases in food costs. I would hope to see that this coming season, 2021, will be another big gardening year for a lot of our residents. And I know there's a lot of supports, and I think the momentum built from this past year and the lessons learned will help serve that. But I'm wondering, is there anything that you see as a barrier to people growing more food next season that we could focus on just to make sure that there's clarity and that people know what to expect as they plan their gardens this year?
I think material sourcing, and I don't know if the municipality has any resources to support that through what they source for themselves, and if there's any partnerships that can happen through local groups like the Local Food Initiative. I think any communications that clarify what people can and can't do is really helpful. So, helping people understand the watering bylaw, helping people understand the backyard chicken bylaw, helping people understand what can happen in their front yard versus their backyard and that sort of stuff. Greenhouses, are they allowed? Where are they allowed? What happens there? Beekeeping, there's a lot of kind of gray areas that kind of crop up in that world that could use some clarification through some communication channels, I think. And I think the LFI is a great channel for that stuff to flow through. They have a huge audience and really help to increase people's knowledge and access to supplies and things. And so being able to convey any regulatory constraints or allowances is a good avenue.
Yeah. So maybe, Gary, that could be or your workshop, there could be a conversation with bylaw and administration before the spring, so that I know that we do a bylaw of the month every month, and perhaps that would be good to plan for, to work with the LFI and yourself, Melissa, for the spring, or a good time, so that that's all brought to mind fresh in time for the gardening season, so that we don't run into any miscommunications or misunderstandings.
Yep, great idea. Thank you. Councillors, any further comments or questions of Ms. Hemphill? Councillor Brooks-Hill.
Yeah, so first off, thanks, Mel, for the presentation and all the work you do. I noticed in the report it said that staff is seeking input from council in regards to this. And in the report, I'm not exactly sure which staff are seeking which direction, or if at all. So I'm not sure who I'm directing this to.
Ms. Braun, I'll let you weigh in.
I can speak to this, or Marianne. I think the intention of the report was just to share information about what's been accomplished to date by Mel and the food security programming we've been involved in. We do have some funds sitting available through EOF to direct towards some activity. And I think the more we can share with you and the more conversation we have with you about, helping you understand what the priorities, the needs of the community are, it'll help me with my allocating funds to specific initiatives that may come forward. If it required, an ask of council, either Marianne or I would prepare the report and bring it to council to ask for very specific input. At this point, it's just a conversation and sharing information and getting a sense of where your priorities lie. If you recall, part of our interest in bringing this forward to council was to respond to the conversation that had happened a few councils ago, right? And just provide more information about all the work that's being done in the background on food security and where we are and what tools and resources we have that we can deploy municipally, regionally, and then how we can advocate for more provincially or federally. Does that answer your question, kind of?
No, that pretty much does. And thanks for thanks for bringing this forward, as well as, well, quite a few of them here. And I think personally, I think that these issues are really important, and moving forward, and it seems like things are, coming along nicely in many ways. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Juncker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Brooks Hill asked the question I was going to ask about the direction that staff needed. So that Ms. Braun basically answered that. And then as well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Melissa and her team. I remember 5 years ago going to the rec center when I was working with the Overweighty Food Group to kind of hear from Melissa, and we were just kind of really talking about food waste and just kind of kicking things off, really. And so 5 years later, still in the grocery industry, it's amazing to see how far we've come. And, just at Overweighty, for instance, when I was there, that store, we were putting so much pressure on head office to implement what we were doing in Revelstoke to company-wide. And there was so much pushback. They didn't want to do it. And now they're doing it across the company, and they're now being credited as these food leaders for this corporation. So the irony is hilarious. But I just think
let them have the credit. That's fine.
Yeah, but it really comes down to, the work that Melissa and her team has done here. And it just starts like with those grassroots. And I just can't say enough good things. You've done so great, and it's really coming along. So I'm so glad to see it. And just in the grocery stores, the amount of food that used to be wasted and now is not, is like, you can't even describe it. You had to see how much went into the trash that doesn't anymore. And just in the sense of food security, going to the food bank now, people get perfectly fine loaves of bread and milk and eggs and stuff that went to the garbage. And just watching, from my perspective now, customers' habits in the store, whereas before, we were trained to, in a sense, don't buy that apple if it has a bruise on it, or don't buy that banana if it's a little bit brown. And so all that ended up going to the garbage. And now if it doesn't get bought, it goes to the food bank. But now I see more and more, actually, people just don't even care. They buy it. And it's just terrific to see that. And with the kids in school learning that now, because I'll speak for my generation, not sure about yours, Mr. Mayor, but we were all taught, at least I was, you don't buy a bruised apple. Mom didn't want that coming home. It was a waste, right? So it's just amazing to see the work she's done, and it's really gone across the community and literally into how we're educating our children now. So it's so terrific. So great job.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to point out that I'm coming to you from our brand new outreach center at 416 2nd Street West. So we're operating our food programs out of here. We've combined food recovery and food bank to make it a more accessible, dignified program, and applying for lots of money to renovate this building and turn it into a really wonderful place. So we look forward to working with the city on our development permits and such for that.
Great. Good to hear that, Melissa. Thank you. Councillors, any further questions or comments? Councillor Elliott, you got one more question?
Yeah, just on the Cody, what came from there is that's the poverty reduction side. Melissa, would you have two recommendations that we can go on the food security side? I mean, that you would like to see most initiated over the next year?
Ooh, may I be very bold? My first wish would be to adopt the urban agriculture bylaw, which would allow folks to sell their produce on their property. Lots of communities are adopting such a bylaw. It's not, I don't think we'll see a ton of them pop up, but just giving people the ability to be producing food commercially in the community, and the business licensing that has to go along with that are the two urban farms that we have right now. The business licensing that we have for them doesn't quite fit. So working on that. And I guess the other wish I have is access to some land to have a demonstration project of more food production, whether that's using technology or innovation, or just getting more young people, or actually, I don't care how old you are, anybody new to farming on the land, producing food in a way that doesn't require a multi-million-dollar investment. It's not feasible to do what we want to do as a community without producing more food. And the price of land is a massive barrier. And so anything we can do to rezone, to be creative in land use that the municipality has control over, we've got a project ready to go, and it's just needing the land. So that's my big ask.
Okay. So what are we talking about for land? How much?
It doesn't have to be lots. A couple acres would be phenomenal.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate your input. Yep. Go ahead, Jackie. Sorry, I didn't see you there.
No, that's all good. You know, I forget what that lot is called, but it's like up in Columbia Park, like up on the hill, like Thunderbird or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's like hard to develop because it drops off, right? My understanding was that it'd be like very difficult to develop a building there. But like, what about like temporary gardening stuff? Or do we have another plan for that?
No, there's been a couple things that have been brought to the community with that, and some other property as well. But yeah, I can't discount that was something that we need to run by staff. And do we own that property? I believe we do, but we can talk about that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be neat. I mean, it's not super central, but I mean, it is for some people. Yeah.
Good.
Cool.
Not central is better for the bears traffic, you know, back and forth.
Good point. That's a good point.
All right. Any further comments? Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate your input. All right. Thanks again. Okay, we're going to move on. Ms. Braun, Wellbeing Survey. I'll let you introduce your guests.
Yes. Okay. So we have Simon Hunt and Benjamin Dorsey. Simon, as most of you know, is a long-term community organizer. He last worked with the city on our opioid dialogues project as part of our mental health and substance use project, and has been working with Jill throughout the pandemic to develop our response to the social sector, and more recently with Ben to develop a survey instrument that we can gather information. Ben himself comes from Parks Canada, BC Hydro, Ministry of Transportation, long background. And you didn't think I was going to say that, did you, Ben? Long background in data management and aggregating. And he's been great in helping to design a survey with input from Sheena Bell, who's also on the call today from Community Connections, and Anita Eli from Interior Health, who is on our recovery task force, to design a survey that will be robust enough to be statistically significant, to share data with social service agencies that will help them in their planning and implementation of programs, and will allow us to repeat the survey at different intervals in the future and get a really good understanding of the community's well-being. So the purpose of the survey, of course, is to find out how our community is doing and to use that information to, again, inform our social sector and key stakeholders and mayor and council, as well as the regional government, on how we can best respond to the impact of the pandemic, which, you know, will have some long-term implications for our community. So I'll let them take it away. And I just want to shout out one other thing I want to say, just a thanks to Jill Zacharias. She was really instrumental in helping mobilize some of our resources to do a community-wide survey of the residents and of their well-being. So, you know, she's moved on to an exciting position, but her spirit lives on in the work that we're all doing collectively. So.
Fantastic. I can see there's Ben. Ben, are you able to share your...
waiting. Sorry, Simon, I'm waiting for Melissa to give me the host back so I can give it to Ben.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting.
How do I do that?
Go to the 3 dots beside my name at the top right and choose Make Host.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, and you're good to go.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Director Braun, for that wonderful introduction. Your Worship, Council, thank you so much also for this opportunity today to present. So yes, our role is with the Department of Community Economic Development as a recovery task force supports, specifically coordinating the implementation of the Revelstoke and Area Community Wellbeing Survey. And Ben Dorsey and myself are here today to present the preliminary results. Next slide. Wonderful. So we're going to dive right in. So to the research question, and the question that we determined over the last few months working with all our partners is, what are the current and anticipated impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on the community of Revelstoke and CS Area B? And so to answer this question, we developed a brief yet informative survey that is repeatable, that was also built on the previous work that's been done, most namely the BC survey in May, in which there were 400,000 respondents. The tourism survey which occurred regionally last summer, and also the social sector survey that we performed in August and September. And so with this survey, we really recognize the need to be inclusive and to be able to reach a broad audience. And our community has a broad audience. And so we wanted to be able to reach out to every single demographic, including those who are already in need of support. And to be able to do so, we attempted to avoid using paper, and we went with an online approach. We did have some paper surveys that were input, especially with our seniors. But yeah, we used an online approach so that we'd be able to download large quantities of raw data for analysis. And yeah, we also really we engaged a lot of knowledge experts within the community, as Director Braun had mentioned during the introduction, to help us develop this survey. Next slide, please. And so with the survey implementation, just to briefly go through the process, the survey was open for about 9 weeks, and it began at the end of October. And we utilized a number of different forms of media, both print media and online, to engage residents. One of the highlights was the development of a QR code by Sarah Windsor with the city, which enabled participants to scan and instantly connect to the survey on their phones. And so we could be out in public and we could connect people to the survey where they could fill it out at an appropriate time. We used also a number of different methods, but ultimately it was identifying a number of champions within the different demographic groups. Those are the ones who volunteered and helped us really access all our key demographics. Next slide, please. And so for this presentation, we utilized a data download from November 30th, of which there were 911 respondents. And the survey was composed of 23 questions in which a number of people were able to complete in 5 minutes or less. And to start with sharing the results, I'd like to hand the presentation over to my colleague, Ben.
Thanks, Simon. So as you can see on this slide, the survey covered 5 general themes across 3 timelines. And what we mean by 3 timelines is we asked folks to report their housing, employment, finances, and mental health pre-COVID, meaning before March 1st, 2020, during COVID from that time to the end of this year. And we asked them to tell us what they expect or how they think they're going to be across these themes into next year. So if we start going through the results, as has been mentioned, I think the survey is still open, and we anticipate getting 2 more weeks of data. So this is kind of preliminary results, but due to the nature of the pandemic, we thought it was important to share this information with you as soon as possible. So on the bar chart on the left, what you can see is most of our respondents, about 60%, are couples, either with or without kids. And the bar chart on the right shows you the age demographic. The gray bars are the age demographics of our respondents, and the blue is the age demographics of Revelstoke from the 2016 census. So what you can see from this chart is most of our respondents are between 25 and 45 years of age. Respondents go all the way from 12 to 87 with a mean age of 43. Okay, so on the first theme of housing, this is a great slide to help you kind of understand how we will eventually analyze and present the data, which is to show you both the changes or the lack of changes across these 3 timelines. So what you see here is most of our respondents own their housing, about 70%, with about a quarter renting. And these numbers have stayed relatively stable both before, and folks expect them to be stable. So in a longer format version of this presentation, Simon talks about the impacts of a disaster like a pandemic on a community and the effects of both the creation of an emerging vulnerable population group and the corollary, which is the resilience or the steadiness of a population to withstand that impact, right? So what we see here is not a lot of change. You know, there's a few highlights here. It might be interesting of folks anticipating needing to leave Revelstoke due to affordability or appropriate housing needs. That's 16 individuals or 2% of our survey. We drill a little deeper into housing by asking folks about stability and affordability. And we're grouping several questions to show you simply that, you know, the majority of our respondents said, yes, their housing is stable, affordable, and it meets their needs. However, the other side of that coin is about 30% of folks said at least one of those things is lacking. And the vast majority of that, the 30%, is due to affordability. You see some uncertainty about the future there. 7% of folks saying, I don't know what the future looks like for my housing. And this is where we will go with the analysis in the future, is we'll look at, well, who are those 30% of folks that have an affordability or stability issue with their housing? And who are those folks that don't know or have some uncertainty about their future? Looking at employment, here on the right, these 3, these are called waffle charts. They're kind of like a pie chart. They show you that before COVID hit, our respondents reported about 2% unemployment. Currently, that goes to 4.7%. This chart in the middle, the orange, shows you both folks who lost their job permanently. It also shows you the folks who lost some work at some point during the COVID pandemic. And that represents about 40% of our respondents. You know, there is some expectation of change. You know, these data do go up to the end of the month. So up to the end of the month, 13% of those folks expected, only 13% still expect to be or underemployed after New Year's. You know, there's a lot of nuance here, and I'm presenting these results to you very briefly as a real gross overview. And as I start rattling off percentage this and percentage that, it can get a bit overwhelming or monotonous. For each of these questions, we've also enabled respondents to share comments with us, and we are analyzing those comments, and they're helping us really acknowledge and connect with the humanity behind these data. So I'll share with you one of those comments related to employment. The respondent says, "I support my husband. He lost his work due to COVID, and my young son." She says, "I am the sole proprietor now for my family. I lost my business due to COVID. However, I found a new full-time job." So there's a lot happening in some of these comments, a lot of information here. And we actually have a group of folks who are dedicating themselves to just analyzing these comments and helping us understand things that we may have missed by creating categorical questions and helping us understand, not everyone fits uniquely into a category. Okay, moving on to finances. In the table, simply what I'm showing you, the two top rows are folks who say they're either thriving or stable enough to meet their needs. And currently that's about 66% of folks in Revelstoke. The orange rows, about 20% of folks say they are in financial crisis or have bills mounting. And if we look kind of longitudinally at this data, what we see is that the folks who say they're stable or thriving is slightly decreasing, and the folks that say they have bills mounting or are in financial crisis is increasing. The bottom row in this table says, "I don't know," so 14%, almost 15% of folks said they don't know what their finances look at in the future. Again, pointing out some uncertainty, which I think we can all acknowledge is a real reality right now. Okay, moving on to mental health and well-being. We asked several questions about mental health and well-being. And one of the metrics Sheena helped us develop here is called the outcome rating scale. It's using clinical counseling as an indicator of how you're doing in as an individual, your personal well-being, interpersonally with your family and close relationships, and socially at work and school. And the chart on the right shows you simply that pre-COVID, as an average, our over 900 respondents reported quite well overall well-being, a score of over 30. But currently it's at 24.6, which is below a clinical cutoff of 25. Generally, people below 25 are folks that are looking to improve their well-being. They may be in counseling. Versus folks that are above the 25 cutoff are generally folks that are happy with where they are across these four categories. And so you can see there's hope or optimism for the future with a score of almost 26 from all respondents. Again, our plan as we proceed with this analysis is to try to help identify the emerging vulnerable, or the most impacted would be another way to say that. And so this ORS score is almost like a response variable. It's almost one of our indicators of who's been affected the most. And if we look at that categorically, the folks affected the most are those living alone, single parents, and there's an age effect as well. So Below age 45, what we see is lower and lower scores for ORS, all the way down to our youngest respondents at 15. Okay, this is a word cloud. So the larger the word, the more commonly respondents picked that word to represent how they currently feel. The three most commonly picked words, as you can see, are worried, hopeful, and content. But related to some of what Lisa Seer shared earlier, I'd like to point out that the least chosen words were, some of the least chosen words were unsafe and bitter, meaning that Revelstoke is a place where people aren't feeling unsafe or bitter right now. Similarly, as we start moving into components of our survey where we are trying to identify actions and priorities, we asked folks, do they have someone that they can reach out to help for? 6% said they don't. Of those 6%, they make up 50% of the folks that identified as homeless. They make up over a third of the respondents in financial crisis or with bills mounting. And they have ORS scores of 15, meaning quite low. So this is one of the questions I think that we'll use to help us understand and identify those folks that are emerging vulnerable. Okay, one of the last questions we asked is, do you know where to find and access local help? Over a quarter said they don't. We pointed them in the survey to the revelstokelife.ca website. And on there, it's a static website indicating contact information across all our social support services. So this helps us identify that there is a need there to make sure we get this information out in the public to where they know where to access help. And then the last question we asked in the survey was we asked respondents to rank what they think were the most important community social priorities. Here we show the top 10 from that exercise, the top being mental health and well-being, followed by housing, and then food security and physical health were tied for third. Okay, so that wraps up the analysis so far. As we look ahead, at the end of this week, we're going to close the survey. Some of the things we plan to do with this work is, yes, we'll finish analyzing the comments. Our goal is to develop an overall combined metric assessing impact across these themes. Identify the emerging vulnerable. Right now, one of the things we're doing is compiling to compare and contrast our data with both national and provincial statistics. And Simon, maybe I'll hand the presentation back to you because I think you.
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. Well. Yeah, just to continue with next steps from Ben, just out of interest, as of today, we are closely approaching 1,000 respondents. So we'll be closing the survey at the end of the workday tomorrow if you know of anyone who needs to participate. And as Ben also emphasized, not only are these numbers important, but we also receive thousands of written comments from the survey, which will also be captured and analyzed and then incorporated into the results. And we've assembled members from the collective impact team who are volunteering to do this. And as we dive deeper into this and into the analysis this month, we'll be also exploring meaningful ways to illustrate and share these results with the community, with our partners, especially with the social sector. And likely not until the new year. And, as for comparing results, I don't know if any of you are aware of that new dashboard that was released this week called BC Speak. And that is a live dashboard of the results from May that we can compare against our own results. And another just emphasis of what Ben had mentioned a couple of times, through our social services, we have a reasonable understanding of who our vulnerable were before the pandemic. But then there's those who have never been in crisis before, and they're likely not connected with local social services. And so really being able to identify who our emerging vulnerable are is a really important step. Another point to add about the contact database. Interestingly enough, over 700 of the respondents provided their contact information, which we'll be able to utilize to potentially share results or important information moving forward. And lastly, we'll be producing a report for the Recovery Task Force in the new year. And if you can flip us to our last slide there, Ben. Yeah, we'd like to thank you very much again for your time. And we really wanted to especially acknowledge the folks listed below. This would have been impossible. These are our champions. And it takes a whole team to accomplish something of this nature. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks Simon and Ben, appreciate it. Interesting as we've seen these surveys go out, and I remember Simon, you and I engaging about this when it first came out down in the farmers market and talking about how this was going to go forward. And it's great to see 1,000 people contributing to this is an amazing thing, and it kind of gives us a snapshot of what's happening in the community. And so I'm appreciating all that the two of you plus your group for what they've done. Kind of having these stats, you look at these surveys after survey after survey, and you wonder how it's going to come to fruition. And when it comes to fruition, and we actually able to see the results and see how people are doing, it's awesome. So thank you so much, and it's nice. And I remember when we first talked about this in the spring as to how things were going to pan out, and it's just amazing to see that go forward. Councillors, any of you have a question or a comment for Simon or Ben? Councillor Charlotte.
Yeah, Simon, you were mentioning about the provincial results. What was that website you were mentioning? Is that out yet, or?
Yes, I have the link, but not right in my at my fingertip at the moment.
Your worship.
Somebody, yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry,
Simon, I do have that link. I'm just getting an email ready for council. I'll send it to you guys.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I'm curious to see that. Especially to compare it, because it's nice, ironically, but I'm hopeful that we see that most of our population is hopeful. Like the general trend is going up again. Like we'll be okay when we get through this, especially where we all feel so disconnected right now with isolation. It's nice to see that there is that general trend that while we might be in trouble right now, that things are going to be looking up, hopefully. Thanks for all the work on this. This is great.
Our pleasure.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, just this survey was done prior to November for the most part, or November, right? The latest December 7th cutoff provided by Dr. Henry is now extended to January. Do you think that'll have much impact on results?
We haven't compared results over the timeline, but obviously the last couple of weeks, just from my experience of being around town, people are, have been more, feeling more fearful. It's been, well, really, we saw COVID come right into our community, which we hadn't seen really up until now. But that would be something that we could look at.
Well, I would just think that the impact is going to be more pronounced in the future. I think the crisis and the fear, all those things are growing?
Well, a really excellent point. That's why we didn't release this survey in August when everyone was happy and outside and it was sunny. We wanted to, the timing was the fall with the change. We knew with the increase in the risk. But so if that answers your question.
And just on the community social priorities, you had mental health, housing, and then food security. You're not talking local growing, growing in your backyard. You're talking food on the table.
I would pass that along to Melissa. She's the pro, but you can just see that some of the priorities are not new in this community. Housing, affordability, food sustainability, and if anything, perhaps the last 8 months has added additional pressure to our situation.
Maybe that's I know that there's a gray zone with food security, and I think what I hear, if they're in financial crisis, they're worried about putting food on their table. And it doesn't really matter much about whether it's local grown or from the grocery store.
Yes, understandable.
Thank you. But I appreciate the information, Simon and Benjamin. I think it's great to have.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott.
Councillors, any further comments or questions? Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate the input. And for doing the survey. I know I was sitting through economic development yesterday and the comments that were made by some of the business community with the current shutdown or the current plan right now. If we remain isolated to January and we follow the rules, then maybe that'll be it. That'll be the short-term thing, and we can get back to actually having food security and having the ability to go out and interact and be with people. If we don't, there's a concern that it's going to be devastating further on. So just that's just an input there more for you, Councillor Elliott, as to what people are feeling as we move forward. Anyway, thank you again for your input and for putting this information together. Very important to us, and I am grateful. Thank you.
Gary, can I add a comment quickly?
Yes, you may, Ms. Brown. Thank you.
Just to add that I think this really highlights the value of having a community development, role or position, within the department, because this is so linked to, as you said, businesses, dealing with labor shortages and their own mental health, in the face of what's been going on. But this data, gathering this data and having it be statistically relevant and valid, I think will be hugely helpful to our social service partners. They can use this to access funding, to demonstrate need, and to respond to directly to the people that have shared their contact information with us. So this is going to be a hugely beneficial database for the entire community.
Great. Thank you again. All right, let's move on to item D, Public Works snow removal. And so Mr. Komanowski, you're going to do a presentation, is that correct?
Yeah, Your Worship, I can just maybe touch on some of the highlights and then field a few questions. I maybe won't go through it word for word, but just thought it'd be timely to bring forward a bit of an update for the 2021 snow removal season. We've included the 24-hour coverage again this year, of course, including a night shift. Included with that is internal employees, contract equipment. And then we still have our weekend shift going on with 2 employees that working Wednesday through Sundays. And then as well, we have our day shift Monday to Fridays, and as well an afternoon shift 2 to 10, which is vacant right now. We are about 98% staffed right across the board. So we're feeling pretty confident about that. We worked diligently at recruiting new hires this year, especially due to the COVID concerns. Something new for us this year, we did include a bit of a COVID plan should we start losing a number of staff on either of our primary shifts, which would be day shift or night shift. If neither one of those shifts operate very well if we're missing, 15, 20% of the staffing, of course, they're going to fail. If you only have one grader operator and one loader operator, we would have to do a collaborative effort and pull together a single shift, which we think would work quite well around 3 a.m. Using our internal staff plus contractors would consist of probably around 20 internal staff and then anywhere from 15 to 18 contractor pieces of equipment, including the trucks. So hopefully we don't have to go there and activate this plan, but we're mindful of it. It isn't that much different than what we typically do outside of our regular shifts. If we have to do an overtime shift, say a Friday night or Saturday night when we don't have our typical coverages, that's what we would be looking at doing. So we're, of course, this year we're basically starting with nothing left in our snow removal budget. So we've been mindful of that in an early snowfall. We didn't have a huge response to that. Really tried to keep the brakes on it and let Mother Nature take care of some of that snow. Priorities are arterial roads, downtown, bus routes, parking lots, those types of things. We try to keep those in mind for our priority routes. Some of the things that we are, guided by are the 1400 for the snow removal policy, traffic and highways bylaw. So those are some of our guiding principles that we use. Yeah, I think those are some of the highlights that I wanted to mention. Is there any questions? If you try to field some questions if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Komanowski. I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I appreciate the fact that we're trying to watch the budget as we move forward here, and as we see nature has done, taken away some of that snow, and right now it's good. I'm not sure what the forecast is for the long haul here for the next for the rest of the month, but hopefully we'll be able to get through it without having to spend into our reserve on that sort of thing. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Junker.
Thanks, and thanks, Mr. Komanowski. Just had one question. There's still people talking on social media, and I drove by a few weeks ago when there was snow, and obviously we had a lesser response, but about stepping up just the snow removal in the school areas, specifically at Arrow Heights, the snowbank coming more into the road and forcing kids to walk more in there. Is there a possibility that maybe in order to get even increased snow removal, you need to come back to council to ask for a bit more funding, or what are your thoughts there?
Yes, Councillor Junker, typically those areas are carefully monitored. All the school zones are carefully monitored. We typically try and push back to make sure what we call the fog lines and the walking areas are open. We don't have, say, on Arrow Heights, for instance, on Park Drive, there isn't a dedicated sidewalk, but our operators are mindful of making sure they're pushing back as far as they can. And by all means, I can bring that forward to staff and keep driving that home. We crew talk that regularly. We do have some new staff, however, no excuses for that. We'll bring it forward and be mindful that those areas are kept as wide as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments, councillors? Thank you, Mr. Komanowski. Appreciate your input, and thanks again for your continued work and your staff as they move forward with snow removal this year. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
We're going to move on to item 9E. Ms. Wade's going to provide an update. So Ms. Wade, I'm looking for you here somewhere, and just wait for you to come on and start. I'm just going to put this down for a second.
All right. Okay, bear with me as I load up my screen here.
Thanks. I'll let you you and Mr. Simon start, I'm just going to take a moment and just deal with an emergent call here.
So.
All righty. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, Marianne.
Great, thank you. All right, so I wanted to get to you before the end of the year a little update on the short-term rental so you would know what the status of this was. So I'm going to start today with looking at the agenda, and we're going to look at a little bit of the background. We're going to look at the survey results, and I'll talk about them in the 3 categories: definitions, conditions, and business licensing, that is dealing with operations and enforcement, and a timeline update. Bear with me as I try to advance it. All right, I'm back in the game now. All right, so I just wanted to give you the background that you're aware of from the various reports, but just a reminder that there was a council resolution on September 13th, 2016 to look at enforcement and engage with the Revelstoke Accommodation Association, review the policy of limiting 125 bedrooms outside of downtown area, the resort, and Mackenzie Village. Then there was a further council resolution November the 8th to basically not move forward with any zoning bylaw amendments for vacation homes until there was a bylaw that was put together to talk about full home rentals and rentals with secondary suites. This is where we created the queue that we have that are on hold, that went to council, were heard, and are on hold from a public hearing. So I just wanted to say it's been almost 4 years since these resolutions, and we were able to get this back to you in this year in February 2020. So when we came to the Committee of the Whole in February 13th, 2020, there was a number of items that council supported and staff has undertaken. Then came COVID in March 12th, 2020. This put our department directed to non-health essential services until August 2020. So we weren't able to focus on this because this was a long-term capital project, and we had to deal with supporting emergency services, EOC, economic recovery, and we had to keep the building department running, doing virtual, changing all our processes. So we weren't able to have our attention on this at that time. So we were able to restart in July, and we were able to go through the survey focus group that we had. This came to you in October 8th at a Committee of the Whole update. We went out to do a further community-wide survey, which closed November the 13th. We had 481 respondents. Then we had one of our staff members who was assigned to the survey analysis had to go on leave. So this caused us a delay in the survey report and analysis. So unfortunately, I was hoping to have this to you in a report, but that was not able to be met for today as far as some of our recommendations. So we're moving into this for the early part of 2021. I'm going to update you now on where we're at. I just wanted to remind everybody that we had guiding principles that formed the engagement in regards to the short-term rentals. So I'm going to update you now on the bylaw amendments that we are currently drafting. Based on the survey, we did the definitions. The definitions were overwhelmingly supported, so we feel very positive about this. So these are drafted actually, and what some of the issues that we raised, I've just highlighted a couple of points that we will clarify as we go through this. Some of the respondents wanted to know why they couldn't use a B&B for as a secondary suite, and others wanted to know, there's a little clarity or confusion around the reference to detached dwellings and prohibition of secondary suites. So we'll come back and clarify this as part of our report to council and in relation to the recommendations for the bylaws. So campground, it was pretty straightforward. Again, overwhelmingly, everybody supported it. There were some comments about adding yurts or cabins. The short-term rental definition, again, was overwhelmingly supported. There were some issues that we need to clarify. Owner-occupied, the differences between the short-term B&Bs and tourist accommodations. Excuse me, I have a very dry throat. And so we'll move forward with that as part of our research to come forward with the recommendations for the bylaw. Tourist accommodation, again, very well accepted. Just note that we don't have short-term rentals in here, and that we will actually clarify this as we move forward with the recommendations for commercial land uses. And we'll clarify with people on the 30 days. Again, we wanted to know what people felt about tourist accommodation in commercial zones. And again, it was supported to have some distinction between commercial operation and owner-occupied short-term rentals in residential homes. This is where we want to understand how to treat short-term rentals in residential zones versus commercial. We need to do a little more clarification, and we're also researching best practices in regards to integrating short-term rental into commercial zones. I've been talking with my colleagues in Golden and Tofino on this. The other aspect was that currently there's single-family dwellings that are operating in short-term rentals in commercial zones. We wanted to see if people still supported that, and overwhelmingly they did. So we're working again on best practices to incorporate short-term rentals into our commercial zones. It'll be part of the recommended bylaws. Conditions. So these are the conditions, and the major one was, of course, dealing with commercial zones and having 24/7 property management available. We wanted to just test the respondents on this, because there's been some issues depending on who the operator is and where it's located. But overall, it was suggested 55% are in support of 24/7 property management being available. And so we're looking at some of the implications of this. There was comments made that they should be residents of Revelstoke. Golden has used this approach as well. So we'll be looking at best practices and making a recommendation on this with the amending bylaws. So another condition was, in regards to the operators again, was 24/7 manager being on call instead. And we wanted again to look at the short-term rentals and to address the complaints instead of requiring the homeowner or manager on site. This was a split a split decision. So we're going to do a little more deeper dive in this in regards to the amendments to consider the separation of 24/7 management in commercial zones and residential zones. Overwhelmingly, people are more supportive of the residential zones of having owner-occupied properties, and commercial zones much more favorable to property management 24/7. So we'll have to make that distinction moving forward in the amendments to the bylaws. Enforcement and licensing, this is to do with the business licensing bylaw we'll have to amend. The most clearly supported was the fire and safety requirements, the 24/7 contact, parking plans, and maximum occupancy. So in the remainder, there was a large list that people had to select from. They were kind of equally supported. So we need to do a little bit more of a deeper dive on this and get best practices from other municipalities so that we can make the recommendations in the amending business licensing bylaw in regards to these items for enforcement. Overall, when we asked people if the guiding principles for regulating short-term rentals was met, basically the majority are saying yes. So we feel very confident in the support we're receiving to move forward with the amendments, and are quite comfortable with that we've had the correct guiding principles for regulating and overseeing and guiding the amendments. Our timeline update, so we got council direction on October the 8th, and we have drafted some bylaws to inform the survey. We prepared and distributed the survey in early November. We've met with some stakeholders. We did community engagement. We talked originally on October 8th about the public meeting, but we didn't do that because of COVID. And we did engagement in November. We are now in the point of refining the bylaw amendments for this month and in January. So this is in progress. And we're looking at bringing the bylaws for consideration probably in early February. And the possible public hearing, we'll have to talk about that because it's going to be subject to COVID regulations and how we move forward with that. So unfortunately, with COVID, we did lose at least 4 months in this process. But we are back in the saddle and moving forward with it. And my apologies that it's not exactly where we'd like it, but none of us predicted COVID. And but we feel very good at where we're at. And I wanted you to know that we're working on the bylaws and the amendment, and we have the results from the survey. I also want to say that we had some very good compliments and feedback on our survey, which I was very happy about. So we feel that this has been quite successful, and it's certainly raised some issues for us to clarify, which we will do moving forward with the amending bylaws and report to council. And that's all I have. Any questions? Oh.
It's Ms. Wade. Councillors, any comments or questions for Ms. Wade? Councillor Juncker.
Thanks. Just a question, and maybe it's I'm jumping the bullet or jump gun or whatever you say. I'm tired. But in regards to the homes and or defining them, so what are we kind of, or what's the thought process like? What are other municipalities looking at, like around occupancy limits? Like what is being looked at to define what would be the difference between, say, my house with a legal secondary suite versus something that's maybe up closer to Arrow Heights that is one single family home that's just massive and sleeps 12 or 14. What's kind of being looked at as what will separate that from maybe a short-term rental versus tourist accommodation? Because there's large homes in town that are one home with not even an additional suite, but just maybe 5,000 square feet. And then there's other homes that are, up in Thomas Brook, for instance, that are like 3 small homes or one unit broken into 3 separate or 4 separate ones that pay 3 or 4 different utility bills right now, one for each kind of unit. So what's kind of the thing we're looking at to differentiate them?
So when we look at some of the municipalities and we're digging into this, a lot of them are 3 and 4 bedrooms, roughly speaking. Normally, things more than that become lodges, and there's a different definition. I can tell you the example that I did with Kicking Horse Resort is we actually modeled the lodge zoning after the lodge definition from Whistler to outline how a lodge would operate in a resort area. So that's definitely something that we need to look at moving forward in the amendments to our zoning.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I was just curious because I understand, obviously, and I support moving away from the spot zoning and more through the licensing kind of thing. But my fear, of course, would be that maybe a single family home that has an occupancy of 6, for instance, is going to pay the same licensing because they're still the same definition as maybe a single family home, but they're putting on their Airbnb site that they have occupancy up to 12 or 14. So I just hope that one of the things as well, I think you had mentioned you're looking at, is licensing based on a set base rate plus occupancy.
And they go by bedroom, like Tofino uses a bedroom count on license.
Okay,
Bedroom
yeah, so that
count.
was, and sorry, go ahead.
Bedroom count.
Yeah, so that was one thing I wanted to ask, and if this is being looked at, and there's lots of Airbnbs, for instance, that might only have 1 or 2 bedrooms, but you can go onto Airbnb.com and there's huge differences in how many they sleep, and thus the usage that's going on to the utilities, because some will put double bunks in a room, whereas one will only put maybe a queen bed, or some now have beds that can be 1 bed split into 2 or 3 beds. So their occupancy that they can sleep and thus how much they charge and usage is significantly more. So maybe is it something that we can look at, that rather than charging, as the mayor said, versus bedrooms versus actual occupancy? And then, for instance, if your license says occupancy of 6 or 8, and then we see you on Airbnb.com selling occupancy for 12, then we have a problem, kind of thing. I'm just trying to look at ways, because I know that, like, from what I've looked at, you can find 2 bedrooms, for instance, and certain developments in town that are occupancy 4, and some are occupancy like 8.
Yeah, and it all depends on the configuration, like you say, in the bedrooms, which is not an easy thing to monitor.
For sure.
So that's why most jurisdictions use a bedroom count, and they try to look at limits on, the number of people, and that should be posted on their listing, and
yeah,
monitor it, and that would be monitored through something like host compliance.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. As long as maybe as part of the licensing, like, which is terrific, like it would be, this is your license to operate, for instance, and this is your max occupancy count. And then if host compliance sees them advertising for a much larger, because maybe we charge them by bedrooms and then they threw in afterwards a couple more bunk beds, and then they're making more money and the city's losing out on a problem we were trying to solve. So yeah, then if the licensing is tied to occupancy and host compliance finds they're breaking that, then their license, we deal with that. So I'm glad to hear you're looking into that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Great. Any further comments, Councillor Elliott? You're muted.
No, Marianne, I just think that's great. We've gone very thorough into this issue, and I do have a question. Do you feel the public hearing is it's a necessary part of it all? Is that right?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
Right, good. That's it.
We have to under legislation. Absolutely.
And that's where you'll get the feedback and specifics and unique issues that might pop up. So it'll be a good chance for all the council to hear what's coming and really get an understanding of things.
Yep.
I think it looked like you very, very well done on what you've got there. So.
Well, thank you. We're working on it.
Any further comments, Council? Councillor Brooks Hill.
Yeah, no, I think I'm really excited to see this move forward, and I think the results look really interesting. I was just wondering if we could be emailed them or something like that, just so I can look at them again.
I can certainly, through the CAO, make available the presentation, and she could pass it along to you.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks again for the update.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, say nothing. Thanks, Ms. Wade. Appreciate your assistance in bringing us forward an update as to where we are for that right at the present time. All right, we are now going to move on to communications, Revelstoke Fire Rescue third quarter report. And Chief DeRusse is here. So Chief, do you want to run through any of this for us?
Certainly, Your Worship, and thank you. This will be the first report that I've presented for you, standard format that's been presented in previous meetings for you. There was just a couple of numbers here that there was a question at the update that we had up at Hillcrest on numbers and how those may be affected by the COVID situation. So I've got some numbers for you, and I spoke briefly about peak call times and that sort of thing. So of the third quarter report, you see the total number there is 88 calls that were responded to. 7 were in the fire category for July, August, and September. I don't have full statistics for the fourth quarter yet, but it is interesting to see what's happening. I can tell you that 2019's third quarter was a total of 6 fire calls. And in 2020, the fourth quarter to date, we're sitting at 12. So there's a significant increase there. Unfortunately, we don't have the causality of that increase, but I do know that the Office of the Fire Commissioner is very interested in seeing what has been happening throughout the year, mostly due to COVID and how that may have affected statistics, because we're sitting currently in Canada, I think we've got over 200 fire deaths, and in BC, I think we're sitting around 49 or 50 right now. So that's a really high statistic over previous years. As far as peak call times, we did look at those for the 3 8-hour periods in a 24-hour day. This year, we're looking at 187 calls, roughly 28 full responses. Of those, 9 were fires. So there are some interesting statistics and more data to pull out if you're interested in seeing that in the next quarterly report. I'll see if I can get a little bit more information for you on that. Yep. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Councillor Juncker.
Yeah, thank you. One thing, I sent off that email a week or two ago about that grant opportunity. Are we going to hopefully look into that? I see throw in a big thumbs up. So yeah, that's awesome. So glad to hear that. Random comment, but it was just I don't know why I'm saying, but anyways, I was watching Undercover Boss the other night on TV, and they were doing a mayor of a show or a city down in Louisiana. So Gary, maybe apply for Undercover Boss. But the mayor took part with the fire department, like went undercover with the fire department. And it was just really interesting to see the differences in the standards that are down there versus up here. And one of the big ones that I had noticed right away was that when you were talking about the turnout gear and making sure that we have 2 for everybody, which is, is great. And we funded that. But down there, they only have 1. Some of them were doubling up on them. So it was just really interesting to see the standards. And even in BC, when I was talking to other of my colleagues, the fire departments there. So it's great to see that the leadership is really ensuring that the firefighters get the equipment that they need to do their job. So thanks to you and your predecessors on that. I just had one other question, and again, it just piqued my curiosity from reading a report on the internet. Do we have the ability in Revelstoke to dictate whether or not carbon monoxide detectors be installed in all new homes, or is that something through the BC Building Code?
Chief?
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, the BC Building Code on new construction typically will define what detector systems may or may not be required for that particular type of building, whether it's private residential, commercial, whether it's got gas, electric, or wood burning appliances. The fire code typically deals with renovations to existing buildings and changes of occupancy, whether it's taking perhaps an old warehouse and turning it into a multi-residential type of building. So that's where the fire code gets a little bit more involved. As far as specifying or writing regulations into the municipality for retrofits or upgrades that don't fall into those two categories, that can be a sensitive topic. If that's where your question is aiming towards, looking at having a bylaw that requires an upgrade to existing buildings that are not under a building code or a fire code, and as far as new construction or renovation goes, you do have the authority to require it, but a retro bylaw can be quite expensive to those property owners. So it can be considered, but should be considered carefully.
For sure, yeah, I appreciate it. I was just curious because yeah, I was reading a thing the other day that showed that carbon monoxide deaths are continuing to climb, and that's a sad thing, obviously, and it's concerning because it's like, what is it, an odorless, smellless, or tasteless? You can't detect it basically unless that detector, and then by the time you have, it's probably too late. So I just think it's maybe something we can look at working with you into the future to see how we could, try and prevent preventable deaths in the community. So yeah, I just appreciate that information, and it was good to read the report. So thank you so much.
Councilors, any further questions for Chief DeRusse?
Maybe.
Councilor Elliott?
Yeah, Chief, motor vehicle accidents. Have your responses been less this year compared to last?
Through your worship, thank you, Councillor. Just looking at the sheet here to see what we had, and my instinct tells me that it's going to be way less because the traveling public was a lot less. So what we have currently, so I'll give you the fourth quarter from 2019. We had 26. The quarter before that was 26. Quarter before that was 22, and the first quarter in 2019 was 25. Currently in this last quarter for 2020, we're at 23. The third quarter is 22. Second quarter is only 11. And before the public provincial health officers' orders came in, the first quarter was 41 MVIs responded to. So those statistics and data show the effect that the traveling public has on the service as well. So when there's a lot less vehicles moving around with that non-essential travel shutdown that originally happened in early March, late March, I think it was. Right. After that, the calls plummeted down, but we still had some. I believe they were mostly commercial vehicle accidents at that time, and now we're starting to see a few more consumer type personal vehicle accidents coming back.
Well, it's just interesting to see, the travel is down, but the home fires are up. So it's pretty obvious. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Thanks, Chief. I appreciate the report and bringing us the statistics as we move forward. Hopefully, we'll get through the winter with less fires and no deaths as far as home fires. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, Council, I'd like to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1K of the Community Charter. If someone want to make that motion for me. Councillor Juncker, seconded by Councillor Charlotte. All in favor? Motion's carried. We're going to go in camera. We're going to take